Good evening, everyone. For those that would like to utilize our ASL services, we have two interpreters this evening, Anna Marie Abreu, Andrea Alefi, and Craig Ridgway. You can pin their videos on the chat, and you can also use the cart services that are available in the chat as well. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Arva Rice. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the interim chair of the Civilian Complaint Review Board. I would like to call the CCRB April public meeting to order. First, on behalf of the entire board, I would like to recognize the 16 victims who were injured in yesterday's horrific shooting and thank our city's first responders who rushed to the scene. They are in our thoughts and prayers, and we wish them a speedy recovery. Would the rest of the board please introduce themselves? Starting with Sal.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sal Carcaterra, and I'm a police commissioner designee.
Good evening also. My name is Frank Dwyer, and I'm also a police commissioner designee.
Good evening. My name is Esmeralda Simmons. I'm from Bedside, Brooklyn. I am a public advocate appointee.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Rivadeneira, and I am a city council designee hailing from the Bronx.
Hi, my name is Sherman Merritt. I'm a city council representative from Brooklyn.
John Siegel, I'm not sure this is on, but hopefully you can hear me. John Siegel, I'm a mayoral appointee and glad to see you all in person. At least those who are in the room here.
Thank you. Is there a quorum? Can I ask for a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Madam Chair, do you want the board members who are online to introduce themselves?
That are on the line? If I can ask them to introduce themselves. Thank you, John.
Hi, this is Corrine Irish. I'm a mayoral appointee and live in Harlem.
Good afternoon, all. This is Erica Bond. I'm sorry I can't be there with all of you in person today. I'm a mayoral designee, and I'm from Brooklyn.
Well, police commissioner designee. I hail from Brooklyn.
Line.
Those are all the board members who are online, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, and with that said, I know that Esmeralda made a motion for the approval of the board minutes. Are there any changes or corrections to the minutes before I officially accept that? Any corrections or approval or changes or corrections?
I think you need to wait for Mr. Puma to arrive before you have a quorum to vote on that.
Okay. All righty. We will hold on the approval of the minutes until we have quorum. So thank you. A few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to advocate for the CCRB in the budget hearing before the City Council's Public Safety Committee. I recapped many of the agency's successes from last year, including gaining the right to investigate bias-based policing, untruthful statements, and sexual misconduct, and the right to self-initiate complaints. With these expanded powers, the agency continues to grow. We need to hire and train numerous employees to staff the new unit investigating bias-based policing and racial profiling. We are constantly working to better our investigative training programs, and our civilian assistance unit needs more staffing. Funding for our outreach team is particularly key. All the investments into the agency is only validated if New Yorkers know we are available to resource them, are an available resource for them. Since the budget hearing, I'm pleased to report that OMB has approved 20 investigator positions, which will fill our next 2 classes of investigators, and authorized the hiring of 3 level 3 investigators and for the new unit on racial profiling and bias-based policing. Plus, we have identified 6 attorneys and 1 data scientist who are actively working with OMB to get onboarded for the administrative prosecution unit and the racial profiling unit. I would like to thank the City Council, who recently advocated for an expanded CCRB budget, namely with the goal of achieving the 0.65% ratio of uniformed officers to CCRB employees outlined in the city charter. I also used the hearing as an opportunity to re-emphasize the main goals the CCRB hopes to achieve this year, starting with receiving an exemption from stealing statutes and improving the way with which NYPD accepts CCRB recommendations. To that end, I met with Police Commissioner Sewell last week to establish a productive working relationship. This will be the first of many meetings, and while we may not always agree, we have laid the foundation for open communication and will both work hard to make New York City safer for everyone. One of the items we discussed is the NYPD disciplinary matrix. The NYPD introduced the matrix for the first time in January 2022 under Commissioner Shea. The department met with the CCRB and other stakeholders while deciding the disciplinary outcomes, and in February of last year, the CCRB and the NYPD signed a memorandum of understanding agreeing to abide by the matrix. The MOU agreed that each group would only deviate from the matrix in extraordinary circumstances. The CCRB hoped the implementation of the matrix would increase how often the NYPD enforced CCRB recommendations. We will now hear from Executive Director John Darsh, who will detail the results of the matrix thus far. John.
Thank you, Chair Rice. My name is John Darsh. I'm the Executive Director of the agency, and I use he, him, and his pronouns. As the agency has been using the matrix for a year now, the Chair charged me on behalf of the board with reporting to the public on how the agency implemented the matrix and what changes the board would suggest that the department make in the matrix. First, a little background. The NYPD introduced the matrix for the first time under then Police Commissioner Shea in January 2021. The matrix is an idea that had been in development by the NYPD for a while. It was recommended by the Blue Ribbon Commission. The department convened to review disciplinary matters. Later, as part of the state-mandated police reform process, of which our interim chair was a facilitator, the department agreed to introduce the matrix. The department met with and took input from the CCRB, as well as other groups, as part of creating the matrix. And then, in February of 2022, the NYPD introduced some amendments to the matrix. Just some statistics to explain where we are now with regard to the matrix. There have been 752 members of service against who the CCRB substantiated at least one allegation of misconduct since the matrix was adopted by the NYPD and the CCRB in February 2021. There are 539 cases in which the police commissioner must still make a ruling on whether to impose discipline and what the penalty will be. The NYPD closed 213 disciplinary cases against members of service, against whom the CCRB substantiated at least one allegation since the matrix was adopted by the NYPD in January 2021. In 127 of those cases, the department did not take any disciplinary action at all. So those cases do not impact the matrix. In 86 cases, the department imposed discipline. The department took the CCRB's disciplinary recommendation 75 times. The department imposed a lesser discipline than recommended by the CCRB 11 times. We are still working to understand what happened in those 11 cases. While the impact of the matrix on the rate at which the NYPD concurs with the CCRB's disciplinary recommendations is unclear, what is very clear is the impact of the matrix on CCRB's discipline recommendations. From 2016 to 2020, the average rate at which the CCRB recommended charges for members of service against who it substantiated at least one allegation of misconduct is 13%. And then during that same time period, the percentage of time the CCRB recommended a command discipline, whether Schedule A or Schedule B, was 47%. And then the rate at which the CCRB recommended either instructions or formalized training was 40%. In 2021, which still includes a small portion of the time when the matrix was not in effect, the CCRB recommended charges for 50.5% of the members of service against who had substantiated at least one allegation. The CCRB recommended either a Schedule A or Schedule B command discipline 44% of the time, and it recommended instructions or formalized training 5% of the time. The most direct impact of the matrix has been the explosion in the size of the open docket of the CCRB's Administrative Prosecution Unit. 2020, the APU had 35 open cases. 2021, the open docket climbed 167 open cases. And already in 2022, there have been 139 cases sent to the APU. This required additional resources, especially prosecutors, be assigned to that unit. That's why we're very thankful that we've been working with the Office of Management and Budget to set start dates for the 4 prosecutors who we've identified and made offers to that were accepted by the agency. So the chair on behalf of the board asked me to meet with the NYPD about ways we could tweak the matrix. Prior to doing so, I met with members of the policy unit, case management unit, and general counsel's office to determine what allegation types resulted in the most hesitation in using the matrix. The areas of the matrix that caused the most hesitation, according to staff, were allegations of discourtesy and allegations of offensive language. The policy unit could not identify anything in the statistics that would indicate there was an issue with discourtesies, but the staff that was present in the panel deliberations indicated there is often a feeling that the mitigated penalty for a discourtesy is too high. The issue of offensive language is more stark. Board panels decided not to substantiate 8 or 12% of the allegations of offensive language where the board had recommended, where the investigator had recommended substantiating an allegation of offensive language. And when you isolate that to allegations of offensive language related to gender, that percentage climbs to 19% of the time the board will will go against the investigator's recommendation of substantiating an allegation of offensive language. That's compared to board panels deciding not to substantiate approximately 7% of all allegations, not just limited to offensive language. I've since met with representatives of the NYPD's Risk Management and Legal Affairs Bureau that are working on making changes to the matrix. I conveyed staff's initial findings. Members of the department I spoke to were receptive to our feedback. During this initial meeting, we discussed various ways to amend the matrix. One of those ideas centered around breaking offensive language into different categories or rows on the matrix, as has been done with entries into premises and use of force, that would allow the board and the department to calibrate the discipline imposed on members of service for those types of misconduct. The members of the department who I met with and I agreed to meet again in the future, but we have not yet scheduled more meetings. And that's where we stand right now with the matrix. I was also hoping, Madam Chair, to give an update on where the case involving police officer Wayne Isaacs is. So do you want me to continue with that, or do you want me to take questions on the matrix right now?
Questions from the board members on the matrix first, and then we'll go into the case of Officer Isaac.
I have a question, and just tell me if I got the numbers right. The two that jumped off the page. So there's a 37% increase in charges cases. Is that correct, based on the new matrix?
Yes. So I don't know if it's a 37% increase, but it increased from 13% to 50%.
Okay. So and 35% on the decrease side in the instruction and training.
Correct.
Let me ask you a question, John. Did you have any idea that these numbers would be so significant when this matrix went into effect?
So I think it was clear from looking at the matrix that it called for much higher types of discipline to be imposed on members of service, just from looking at the numbers. But I had not foreseen that stark an increase.
John, I have a question, if you can hear me. You mentioned that 100 of the 213 cases the NYPD closed, 123 that we recommended be substantiated, the NYPD took no disciplinary action. That's, by my calculation, 57.7% of the cases that we've substantiated. And you said that that is not considered a deviation under the matrix. Can you just explain that a little bit? Because I'm confused.
So there's a difference between following the matrix and then concurrence with the CCRB's recommendation. So we would not, those cases are not considered concurring with the CCRB's recommendation because we recommended that those officers be disciplined at one level or another. But since the department felt that there was no discipline required, they did not even go to the analysis of using the matrix.
And do we, or are we entitled to some understanding as to why they determined no discipline was required in 57.7% of cases that we substantiated?
Yes, Ms. Irish. So the three types of categories, broadly speaking, are when officers have retired, when officers had been previously adjudicated to have committed some misconduct for the same conduct by the department, and if the department considered that we got them the case too close to the SOL for them to impose discipline. And so I don't have the exact breakdown of those numbers, but those are the three largest categories.
So?
No, I lost my thread. I'm fine. John, how you doing? Just let me just finish up with my questions. I don't want to amend the matrix. The last part, you said you're going to have a follow up with the PD, but no date set. Correct?
Correct.
Because we've spoken about this for a while now, and while we're waiting for a date and while we're waiting to make possibly some amendments to this matrix, it's still moving forward with what I see is very, excessive at times, and a jump of almost 40%, discipline. So I would just like to see maybe these meetings done sooner than later, so we could maybe come to some consensus to kind of wrap our arms around this and maybe put it in a better direction. And this, by the way, I've been on panels where other board members, myself, mayoral designees, council designees, we're all basically saying, I think something needs to be done to that matrix. So I'm not only speaking for myself here, and so I would just like to see if we can just move that along a little at a little quicker pace. Thanks, John.
Understood.
Good afternoon, John. Thank you for that report, and thank you for Madam Chair and Executive Director for meeting with the officials at NYPD regarding the matrix. I'm going to be a little more basic about it. I think the board needs to have a full report on the matrix and have some discussions among ourselves in terms of what we think are the most alarming parts of its execution by ourselves, and also the actions or inactions by the department, and that we should make some recommendations on how we feel the matrix needs to be changed, or how implementation of the matrix needs to occur. I would like to see that kind of discussion within this board. And that's with full appreciation of all the work you've already done and discussions you've had with the department.
So,
Sorry, John, I know you were going to say something.
I appreciate Simmons' point, and I will work with the general counsel and the policy unit and the chair to make sure that conversation is that you're given the information you have to have that fulsome conversation in. But I think we might have to have that in public. I don't know if it's possible to do that in private. I don't want to overpromise to the board, and I'm going to check with the general counsel afterwards to make, because I don't, the open meetings law is extremely serious, and just need to make sure that we're following it in the right way. Which is why we presented this information today in public, so that you can have this conversation.
John Siegel here. I have a question. I don't know. It occurs to me as we're speaking, I don't know if you have the information or can answer it, but under the matrix, the one area of discretion for the board in recommending penalties is where we find a violation, but we have the option of designating the action as aggravated or mitigated, which changes the result. Has there been any analysis that you know of the categories of misconduct or the types of misconduct that we've reviewed, and are there areas where we've tended to more find them aggravated or mitigated? And the reason I ask is, I think from a results-oriented point of view, there have been times where some of us have looked at what the matrix result is and made recommendations tied to what the penalty would result in if we designate it as aggravated or mitigated. And I'm thinking that may shed some light on areas where board members tend to think that the outcomes depart from what perhaps they'd prefer, so we try to adjust it by those designations. I hope that makes sense, but has there been any look at that?
That actually made a ton of sense, and no, if we have looked at it in that way, I'm not aware of it, and I think that's actually a very fruitful area of inquiry. So we will look at it.
The questions in regards to the discipline.
Executive Director Frank Dwyer. I would add that I've seen significant discourse among myself and my fellow board members in areas such as use of force, or substantiated and said it is the presumptive And yet in the discussion, putting aside the fact I was often on something or exonerating, but in discussion, my fellow board members
I'm sorry, I can't hear Mr. Dwyer. I heard you say, can you hear me now? The last thing I heard you say was, in discussion, my fellow board members and I.
that the penalty for presumptive, which is the middle one, for presumptive on use of force, which is 20 days, if I remember correctly, seemed excessive, but the board members still felt that the presumptive use of force was the appropriate designation of what happened, even though they didn't agree with the penalty, but they felt obligated to go with it. So I think, one, the use of force is a whole area where the whole continuum is worthy of discussion. So, for example, a shove of a shoulder versus a much harder use of force, yet they both, if you come down with a presumptive penalty, have a 20-day penalty. The business card area, as I have pointed out in panels and others have pointed out, in fact, including yourself, the executive director, when 2 or 3 years ago at the public meeting, you put a monetary value on what a day's penalty is, and it's whatever the number we come up with, $400. Well, at the moment, failure to give a business card is presumptively, I believe, 3 days. I regularly say that no, I mean, the mitigation penalty of 1 day is far more appropriate. So these are at least 2 other categories where I feel discussion with the police department is important. And I suspect now that we know this work is going on, that all of us collectively can reflect back on the work we've done and see what other categories are present. I would also ask that when we're doing panels, that since this is such an important topic, that from this day forward, staff collect in a very fastidious way records of any time panel members say, though we substantiate as presumptive, we have concerns about the penalty, and then you'll have much stronger data to engage for or against the matrix in its present form.
So I appreciate your what you're saying, Mr. Dwyer. One of the things that I made sure to do when I was talking with staff at the department is try and give areas where there was a consensus, and not get into areas where, while some board members or groups of board members might have felt something was too high, others may have disagreed. So the areas where there was a lot of agreement where I went back to the department were on discourtesy, where there was a mitigating factor, and offensive language. And then, and to me, if you look what you're saying about force, the matrix divides force into numerous categories and subcategories, which are rows in the matrix, which if we haven't put on our website, I'll make sure it's there for the public to go through. And it's online on the NYPD's website. And so I feel like there is a sufficient, but what I feel isn't material. Like, clearly the department is interested in what the board feels. And it is tough to kind of break down the feelings as a whole, because not everyone feels. There are some people who feel that force is excessive, and there are other people who feel that force's penalties are too high, and there are other people who feel that abuse of authority penalties are too high, and then there are other people who feel the opposite. And so the two waste, the two categories where we were able to find a consensus were where I was. That doesn't mean that there isn't one, is on discourtesies that are where there's a mitigating factor, where the mitigating factors prevail, and then offensive language.
So I believe you were trying to ask the question as well.
Sorry, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing, but I just want to chime in quickly, which is to say, I think it's important that we continue to have this conversation about the matrix and how it's being implemented, but I also just want to underscore Board Member Irish's point around the 213 cases. If we're finding that in 60% of cases, the matrix isn't even coming into play because there's disagreement between CCRB and the department about whether discipline needs to be imposed at all, I think that needs to be a point of discussion with the NYPD that goes beyond just the matrix and how it's applied, because we're clearly not coming into agreement about whether any discipline is needed at all. And I do think some of the rationale for taking on the matrix was to create more agreement in terms of the imposition of discipline, both in terms of the kind of discipline, but also I think many of us were hoping that there'd be higher levels of agreement when it comes to whether misconduct occurred. So I just want to name that as an important point for continued discussion with the NYPD as we talk about changes to the matrix.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
John, just and thank you, Chair, for having this conversation. I know when the board attempted to do its own matrix years ago, we had reached out to the department to do an analysis of similar cases and see what the department would use in discipline measures in those similar cases. I wonder, to Erica's point, to sort of align us a little bit better, are we getting that same information when we're having these conversations now about the matrix that the department created? My understanding was that the department was creating this to address many of the issues that were brought up in the past administration, and that they took this sort of aggressive approach in establishing the higher discipline and also making it a progressive matrix. I just wanted to understand, how are we trying to get information back from the department about their usage of their own matrix before we also do an analysis of how we would recommend changes to their matrix?
Thank you, Mr. Rivadeneira. The department has been following the guidelines, not guidelines, the requirements set out by the council in, I'm forgetting the name of the city council bill that requires them to report out on cases where they do not concur with either the CCRB's discipline recommendation or the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of Trials recommendation. And so our policy unit has been compiling those, trying to get a handle on them. We are also redacting them and putting them online for people to see. So the issue isn't really a flow of information. It's trying to understand the information we do have and what it is telling us, and then coming to an agreement with the department on what the department actually, whether they agree with us or not about the penalty levels.
No.
John, I have one other question. You mentioned that the department implemented amendments to the matrix in February of this year, if I heard correctly. I'm very interested in hearing what those amendments are and if they intend to further amend before or after discussions with the CCRB.
So I will get you, those amendments were made public in February, and we will share that on our website, and we will I'll also email it to all the board members so that you have it. There's a memo they had with the explanation of the changes as well as the new matrix. So we'll let you have it so you can see what the changes are.
Are there any more questions for our executive director in regards to the discipline matrix portion of his report? Any other questions? Right.
I just have one more question, and that's with regards to the cases that we've subbed, but there hasn't been a final decision by NYPD. So if I'm understanding this correctly, we had 752 officers that have one or more allegations substantiated against them. NYPD has made a decision on those cases one way or the other in 213 cases. I'm just curious what the timeline is like between when we're making a recommendation and NYPD is making a determination about whether to impose discipline or not. Do we have any numbers on the average amount of time that that's taking?
I'll get that for you. I don't have it in front of me.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, it's more of an observation. I mean, I don't think it should get lost on us, among the many things the executive director said, that in 86 cases, the department concurred with the findings, and 75 out of the 86, they did take the recommendation, which, I don't know, maybe somebody smarter than I am could do it in their head, but I would suspect that's somewhere in the 85 to 90% percentage range. So when they do concur, they seem to take the recommendation at a very high rate. As somebody who sits on panels and regularly doesn't concur with my colleagues, I think I would find something similar that I often also don't incur. But what I'm saying here is we shouldn't miss the fact when they agree that it is a disciplinary matter, they do take the recommendations at a very high rate.
Excellent points brought up by many members of the board, which we will take back and discuss further. Unless I hear any other questions, I'm going to ask our executive director to continue with the rest of his report, and then we will do a vote on the minutes. John?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to update folks on the CCRB case involving police officer Wayne Isaacs. We've received many inquiries around the status of the APU trial prosecuting officer Isaacs. And just to give you all a little background, in 2016, Officer Isaacs fatally shot Delron Small. In 2017, Officer Isaacs was found not guilty of the murder of Mr. Small. In 2018, members of Mr. Small's family filed a complaint with this agency. And after a full investigation, the CCRB substantiated misconduct against Officer Isaacs. One allegation that police officer Isaacs used excessive force when he shot Mr. Small. In October of 2020, the agency filed charges and specifications with the NYPD. In January of 2021, the department served police officer Isaacs with those charges and specifications. In March of 2021, police officer Isaacs' attorney filed an Article 78 proceeding with the Supreme Court, New York County, asking for the court to stop the disciplinary proceeding. In October 2021, the CCRB filed a motion to unseal the criminal case against Officer Isaacs in order to obtain all of the records used during the criminal trial. Attorney General James's office joined in our application, and that application is still pending. In January of 2022, the court denied police officer Isaacs' application in his Article 78 proceeding because the police commissioner had not made a final determination in the case. And then last month, Officer Isaacs' attorney wrote a letter to the police commissioner asking her to use the power she has under Provision 2, the 2012 MOU that created the Administrative Prosecution Unit. Provision 2 allows the police commissioner to retain cases where the subject officer either has no disciplinary history or there are parallel or related criminal investigations. Most of the time when Provision 2 is in play, the police department makes the determination on its own. It is rare but not unprecedented for a subject officer to request the police commissioner use their powers under Provision 2. In those cases, it's almost akin to a motion to dismiss in a criminal trial. The CCRB submitted its response to Officer Isaac's request, and we are waiting the police commissioner's decision. And I just want to point out that much of the information in this case is sealed because Officer Isaacs was acquitted in the criminal trial. And this case is an example of why the CCRB has been advocating for an exemption to the state's sealing statutes. And before we get started further this afternoon, I wanted to just give a quick update on our agency operations. We continue to review protest cases and expect to have a protest report out in the coming months. Our office is open for walk-in complaints, but you can also file complaints online at nyc.gov/CCRB complaint. That's nyc.gov/CCRB COMPLANT, or by telephone at 1-800-341-2272, or by just calling 311. We're going to ask people to limit their comments to 4 minutes in the public session. And I want to thank the staff for their hard work, and thanks to the members of the public who are participating today. And if there are any other questions, I'm available, Madam Chair, to answer them.
Before we go to the public comment, does anyone have any questions in regards to the report that we just heard from our chair on the Isaacs case? Any clarifying questions on the Isaacs case? Any board members? Anyone online?
I just have one question. So, John, you noted that Officer Isaac's attorney is asking the police commissioner to take the case under Provision 2. The two reasons that that can happen is where there's no prior history or there's a parallel investigation or criminal case. Do you know which of those applies here or both?
So I don't know if Officer Isaacs has prior disciplinary history, but I do know that there was a parallel criminal investigation to this case.
But that's closed now, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So we don't have any reason to believe there are other parallel investigations happening.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
For that clarification, any other questions about the update on the Isaacs case? Okay. All right. We have been joined by another board member who we're going to ask if he can introduce himself.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Puma. I'm the Manhattan City Council designee to the board, and I live in Manhattan on the Lower East Side.
So, are there any amendments or corrections to the minutes as presented? Any corrections? Any amendments? All right. Once again, can I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor of accepting the minutes as presented with aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. We're going to have a presentation from our senior advisor, Yahaira Alvarez, on outreach. Yahaira?
Thank you so much, Chair. I hope you can see my screen. Perfect. Apologies, let me just do it from the beginning. Great. As the chair mentioned, my name is Yahira Alvarez. I'm the Senior Advisor and Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the CCRB. I'm here filling in for the irreplaceable Jahai Rose, who is on a well-deserved vacation. So I wanted to take some time to have those that are joining us virtually or in person to give you a brief overview of the agency. As was discussed, we are the Civilian Complaint Review Board. We're the nation's largest oversight entity of the nation's largest police force. The agency is responsible for investigating, mediating, and administratively prosecuting complaints of misconduct alleged against members of the NYPD. As you can see, we are governed by a 15-member board. 5 are appointed by the mayor, 5 are appointed by the city council, 3 are designated by the police commissioner, but then appointed by the mayor. 1 is appointed by the public advocate, and the chair is co-appointed by the mayor and the city council. So although we are an agency that investigates allegations of police misconduct, we don't investigate all allegations of police misconduct. There are 4 major categories that we investigate, and a helpful reminder on what we investigate is the acronym FADO, F-A-D-O. The F is for force. So if force is used in an encounter with a police officer that falls within our jurisdiction, we would then investigate it to determine if it was excessive or unnecessary given the totality of the circumstances. The second category is abuse of authority. This is a very large category. Some of the allegations that fall within that category are improper entry, refusal to provide a name and shield number, improper stops, searches or frisks, threatening to call ICE, forcible removal to the hospital, and sexual misconduct, among others. The D is for discourtesy. So this includes discourteous gestures, actions, and words like the use of profanity. And finally, we investigate allegations of offensive language. So this is language that inappropriately refers to my race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, nationality, disability status, religion, etc. And as we've mentioned before, the agency is preparing to soon investigate allegations of racial profiling and bias-based policing, and we'll be presenting on that soon. So as a reminder, the Right to Know Act is now law. So what that means is that in majority of situations and encounters with police officers, a police officer must identify themselves by providing their name and other information such as their rank, command, and shield number upon request. And in certain situations, they would proactively provide that information. And this is what a card would look like. With some exceptions, they have to explain the purpose of that interaction with the civilian. In situations where they do not have the legal justification to search you, they must proactively ask for that consent. And they have to also inform you of your right to say no. We also have to provide language access services upon request, or if they notice that the civilian that they're interacting with is monolingual and does not speak English. As a reminder, you can also report allegations of police misconduct that you have witnessed on social media or on the news, even if you were not there in person. Our Twitter handle is @CCRB_NYC. And if you have experienced or witnessed misconduct, there are multiple ways of accessing the agency. You can call everyone's favorite number, 311. You can contact us directly at 1-800-341-2272. You can visit our office located in Lower Manhattan at 100 Church Street, 10th floor. You can file a complaint at your local precinct. And as a reminder, every precinct is required to take a CCRB complaint. And you can also mail in a complaint at our address, 100 Church Street, 10th floor, New York, New York, 10007. And finally, we want to remind everyone that the CCRB is hiring. We encourage you to share this information with your networks You can find the job posting of investigator along with other open positions at nyc.gov/jobs. If you have any questions, you can email careers@ccrb.nyc.gov, and more information about the investigator position is found on our website, which we will include in the chat. And last but not least, we have a dedicated team of coordinators that will go to any after-school program, religious institution, any community event that you have to share this information about the CCRB. You can reach us at outreach@ccrb.nyc.gov to request a presentation. Again, we're in person and also virtual. And these are our social media handles. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So to the board members present in the room first, do you all have any questions of your higher up in regards to our presentation? Any questions, comments, feedback? And to our members who are online? Okay, hearing none, we will now enter the public comment portion of the meeting. If you are interested in making a public comment, please line up behind the, wait, we don't have a podium. But if you are joining, you can use the raise your hand feature if you are joining us virtually, and we will go in order. Please keep your comments to 4 minutes, and we're going to ask Yohira if you would please call on the first person.
Thank you, Chair. The first person on our list is joining us virtually, Michael Mayers.
Did someone allow upgrade Mr. Myers so he can speak?
It looks like there's a bit of a technical difficulty with Michael, so we will circle back. Next, we have Vincent Riggins.
Doing, man, everything good? Yep.
Vincent, we heard a little bit of you can.
Yes, I apologize. I had a package delivery at the same time you called on me. I got a couple of questions. One, I apologize. Well, I'm Vincent Riggins. I'm co-chair of Public Safety Community Board number 5, and I got on a little late. But can you briefly explain what is meant by your metrics? That's a simple question. I give them all to you for the sake of time. And what's the difference between lying and misleading? What's the difference between lying and misleading? Because apparently the commissioner is using misleading as not being lying. So I definitely want you to explain that to me as well. One more question. If you can start answering those, I'm gonna draw up the other one. Oh, and under section 307B of the Crimes Act 1900, why would that not apply in officers giving false or misleading information? And I'll wait for your response.
Thank you, Mr. Riggins. We're going to ask our executive director to respond to the first question about what exactly we were referring to when we mentioned the discipline matrix, and then ask him about the questions between the difference between lying and misleading as has been defined by our new police commissioner.
Okay. Well, discipline is the word I was missing, so that should be an easy answer. I didn't have discipline, so now I know what the metrics is. Go ahead. Go right ahead. Sorry.
No problem, Mr. Riggins. The matrix is a system that the department developed with input from the community and other stakeholders, including the CCRB, to try and create a discipline system that is consistent and predictable for different levels of misconduct, and also institutes a system of progressive discipline. And as was pointed out by Ms. Simmons, they recently updated it in February of this year, and we are engaged in conversations with the department about future changes to the matrix. With regard to the difference between lying and misleading, I don't know the particular cases, but I believe misleading is when everything you say is technically true, but you are conveying a false impression of what the facts are to the person asking a question, and lying is when you intentionally tell something that is not true. And then I'm not familiar with Section 302 of the Crimes Act.
Okay, so from my understanding, the commissioner, past or present, was using the difference in the words misleading or lying to vacate or not discipline officers? Is that what I'm reading? Is that accurate?
I don't.
Some of the cases that you guys already found the officers was guilty of lying, but none of them got any discipline from that, from lying, and the commissioner found that they were misleading, not lying.
So until recently, cases involving allegations of false statements were not in the CCRB's jurisdiction. And so there was recently a report put out by Latino Justice, which is part of the Puerto Rican Legal Defense Fund, and that went into how the department handled cases in which we found evidence that an officer gave a false statement and then referred that to the department for investigation. So that's not, those statistics are not exactly in our purview, and none of those cases were handled by the current police commission.
Let me ask one more follow-up question. So is that a reason or justification a commissioner can use not to follow your recommendation? Well, I guess they can. They can just ignore it, I guess. But that's what I'm trying to find out. Just by them saying, oh, he didn't lie, it was a little misleading. Is that justification for a commissioner to do that and not take action against the CCRB's filing? Is really what
so I think we're in a much different situation now than during the period covered by the report, because now telling untruthful statements to the CCRB is within our jurisdiction, and also giving untruthful statements to entities other than the CCRB is considered an abuse of authority. So now these cases, which we previously had referred out, are going to be handled inside the CCRB as part of our jurisdiction. And, then we'll be able to give you much better feedback and clear answers as to how the department treats those cases and why they treat them that way. Part of the problem with the old system is it was not transparent, and we don't have a lot of insight into why the department did what it did.
So today you have more transparency?
We do. We just don't have a lot of cases where there's been a final disposition where we've had untruthful statements as part of our jurisdiction.
Final question, if you will. So 50C allow you to look back at police officers' records. How come that was not applied in the cases that you found where officers actually lied? Or did you guys do that research?
I'm not familiar. Mr. Riggins, I'm going to ask that you reach out to, that you give my number to, that you give your number and contact information to someone online who's going to chat with you, and then my policy people will call you and get exactly what you're asking, and we'll get answers for you.
Thank you. Sorry for being long-winded.
No, sir. Those are good questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Riggin.
You're welcome.
Were you trying to make a comment or no? You're fine. Okay, thank you. Your hire, can we hear from the next person with a question?
Thank you, Mr. Riggins. It's nice to hear from you again. We will try Michael Myers one more time, and as we're calling them up, I just want to acknowledge and thank staff from Councilmember Grace Ming's office and Queens, Bronx, and Manhattan DA's offices, Councilmember Carlina Rivera's office, the Office of Public Advocate Jumani Williams, the Office of Speaker and Assembly Member Carl Hasty, and Speaker Adrian Adams, staff for all attending tonight. Thank you so much. Michael? There's a bit of feedback. Wanna try that again?
Can you hear me now?
There's a bit of feedback. We'll circle back with you, Michael, and see if we can sort that out and try to alleviate that. Next, we'll be hearing from Chris Dunn, and we'll circle back with Michael.
Good afternoon, everyone. I do wish I were a podium, and I look forward to us being in person again sometime soon. I want to focus on the matrix discussion, which was quite illuminating, and picking up on what Corinne and Erica said, although they were very subtle about it, I find quite alarming. And I want to start with, John, I want to make sure I understand why the agency believes it's appropriate to be modifying matrix. And I understand it, the modifications you are considering are modifications to lessen penalties. And I heard your report about the increase in charges in spec cases, but I assume that by itself would not be a reason for changing it. And I heard you suggest that some board members are resisting subbing cases because of their view of the appropriateness of the matrix, which sounds to me like something that should not be happening. But can you, John, explain what the agency's thinking is about trying to change the matrix?
It is based on the conversations with staff who are in the panels. It was determined that the areas in which the board had a consensus, a broad consensus that the penalties were too high, was when they determined a mitigated penalty for discourtesies was appropriate. And then in many cases involving offensive language, where either the term was close to being considered part of the common language. It had been attenuated from its origin as offensive language, and then, or in statements that were discourteous, that the board felt were more discourteous than offensive language, because trying to think of a way to do it without using offensive language, and it's very difficult, but so let's say so let's it's just tough to do it in this situation, but there are terms which have become the word bitch to refer to women or sometimes men, in the sexual politics of it, it sometimes isn't clear that that use of that language is actually meant to be an offensive language gender. And so it becomes it becomes questionable whether that is offensive language or a mere discourtesy. So there's no question it is misconduct. Is what is the level of misconduct?
Okay, well, I will, I hear what you're saying. I think one of the board members, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was asking for a fuller board discussion about this. And since I'm not on the board, I'll just say as a member of the public, I think that's imperative. If the agency is going to be advocating with the police department to reduce penalties in the matrix, which from our perspective is not demanding enough of police officers, I think it's essential that the agency have an open discussion before it goes off and starts negotiating. And I'm amused, as I always am, by Sal's suggestion this is going too slowly. From my position, it's going too fast, and I cannot tell how many of the members of the board are fully informed about what the status is of negotiations with the department about this. But I, for one, just want to say very loudly and clearly that we have a lot of concerns if the CCRB is calling for a reduction of penalties. Matrix. The other thing I just want to mention, I appreciate the detailed accounting, John, in terms of the numbers. But I do want to pick up on a couple of things, notwithstanding Frank's effort to play this as if the department is somehow doing something laudable. If there are 86 total cases where discipline is imposed out of 700 since February of 2021, which is what I understood the numbers to be, that is a paltry number. And I am prepared to wager, although I don't know that, I don't want to put you on the spot, John, but if you know, of the 75 where they accepted your recommendation, how many of them are for instructions or formalized training, which is, I think, in our book, is not discipline at all.
So I think so number one, I don't have the breakdown for you, and I can get that for you. In 77 of the 88 cases, or 76 of the cases, they complied with our recommendation. And as you can see, we recommended very few instructions cases. And the reason why it is tough to make a conclusion about how the department is treating these cases is there are 500 cases that are open where the department hasn't made a determination yet, and there is a new police commissioner. And so I think it behooves us to be a little, and I understand your concern and your vigilance on this issue, but I just think it's too soon to reach a conclusion one way or the other how this police commissioner is acting and on CCRB recommendations. I think one of the reasons why, in the same way that you feel that it's going too fast and Sal feels like it's going too slow, we're having this conversation, disclosing the data we do have so that we can not do things in secret and explain what's going on to the public so you know where we stand.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I appreciate that. And you guys, I've said this many times, for all my criticisms of the CCRB, you're terrific in terms of disclosing information. You are the most transparent city agency when it comes to policing by a wide margin, full stop. But the fact that Commissioner Sewell has been here for 3 months doesn't give me a lot of comfort about 539 cases that have been sitting there since February of 2021. And I'm the first person to say, let's see what her practice is. What I am saying is, and what many of us know, the department has a terrible history on this. I'm always looking forward to a new PC coming in and all of a sudden turning that around. I am not holding my breath for that. And I don't see anything in the numbers so far to suggest things are changing. To be sure, there are a lot of undecided cases. But I think that Corinne flagged this. When you talk about total they are closing, which has always been a problem, they're just saying drop dead to the CCRB. And then look at the actual discipline they are imposing, and it may well be that a smaller percentage of your cases they're recommending training and instructions. I get that. I'm going to guess it's a disproportionate number of the 75. I'm just going to guess. I don't have any idea. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. So I guess all I'm saying is thank you for this presentation. Thank you for getting the numbers out. Please hear me. I say this support. The notion of people undoing, this is my language, not yours, undoing the matrix is an alarming notion to me. In a department that has not distinguished itself in terms of its disciplinary practices. I'll get off my soapbox. I look forward to standing in front of a podium in front of all of you sometime soon. Thank you.
Don Siegel here. It was always the intention stated at the time the matrix was adopted that it would be reviewed after a year, number one. And number two, I don't think it's accurate to take the comments that have been made as the CCRB trying to reduce the level of discipline. I don't think that's accurate at all. And one of the aspects of it is that the matrix, like any guidelines, impose comparative penalties for different offenses. And some of the discussion has been comparing those outcomes under the matrix because some of us feel that in some areas they're too low. So the two areas that John identified are a small portion of the types of things that have been discussed in panels and that I agree totally need to be discussed fully and publicly. But I'd urge you not to jump to the conclusion that the CCRB is trying to reduce discipline under the matrix. I don't think that that's accurate.
Okay, John, I appreciate that, and I look forward to hearing a fuller discussion and particularly an identification of cases where the agency is going to recommend an increase in penalty. I just haven't heard that articulated so far.
Madam Chair, there was just one other thing that Mr. Siegel reminded me of that I was hoping I could address, and that is February 2021 was the first time the board voted to adopt the matrix. We voted 3 cases involving 1 member of service in March of 2021, and then it took several months for us to get the matrix integrated into our system to start using it more fully. And so while I understand 500 cases outstanding is a lot of cases to have open for a year, I don't think that's like, it's not like all those cases were decided on February 1st, 2021. The vast majority of those 500 cases are much newer than a year old, 14 months old.
Thank you for the presentation.
John,
Thank you, John, for providing that input on where the CCRB is on this on the discipline matrix. And thank you, Mr. Dunn. It's wonderful to meet you, and I look forward to further conversation and partnership with you. Yahira, can we hear from the next person on the list?
Can I just ask for a clarification in relation to this, with regards to the April monthly report, the number of NYPD decisions for non-APU cases? It says the report includes February and not March. Is that just a mistake, or have there been no determinations by NYPD in March?
So what had been happening is sometimes cases the reports were coming in very close to the board meeting date. And so at some point last year, we believe we switched to being a month behind. So we'll, instead of reporting the March data in April, we're reporting the February data in April.
Okay, because I thought for the APU cases, it is March data.
Because the APU, it's different tracks from the department. On the APU cases, we're getting the decisions from DCT in most cases, whereas the non-APU cases we're getting from DAO. And sometimes we get them from the police commissioner. It's in an effort to make sure the information was accurate, we decided to delay the non-APU cases by a month. And I should have, I thought I must have explained that back then. If we didn't, I apologize. That's my fault.
Thank you.
Fine, questions from the board? Listen to the next person on the list.
Thank you, Chair. We will try Michael one more time.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
There's a lot of feedback. I'm not sure if you can step away from, I don't know if you're both on your phone and the laptop. It's pretty bad feedback, Michael. I'm really sorry.
Public meeting.
So Michael, our next public meeting will be on May 13th, May 11th. You can join us virtually or in person. If you have any other questions before that, or if you want to relay what you wanted to ask, you can email me, yalvarez@ccrb.nyc.gov. So that's YALV as in Victor, AREZ. Apologies, Michael. Chair, that concludes our public session.
Madam Chair, I just want to say, while we may have been unable to get Mr. Myers to give a statement today, I think we should recognize the history he's had with policing in this city and civilian oversight in the city. And, you know, he brought to our attention the issue with limiting how long people could speak to 2 minutes being too short. We went back and looked at the situation and extended it to 4 minutes. And like I truly value, and I know many of the other board members do value, Mr. Myers and his contributions. And I want to apologize that we were unable to get him online today, and assure him, you know, whether he comes down in person next month, or we'll just make sure we get a better connection so that he can speak at the next meeting.
Thank you, John, for that acknowledgement. Anything else from any of the board members in the room or online, who I can now see? So thank you so much for that adjustment. All right. Do we have any old business to come before the board? Any old business? Old business? Right. And do we have any new business to come before the board? Anything new? Anything new? Hearing none, I am going to move now that we break into executive session. The agenda for executive session is the board will receive an update from the general counsel, and the executive director will discuss the following 3 items: scheduling issues for panels, update on pending personnel actions, and scheduling board training sessions. Do I have a motion to conclude the meeting? Do I have a second? Second. All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, so moved. Meeting is concluded. Thank you.